All right, I think we're live. We will start in just a few minutes.
One minute until showtime.
We'll be starting in a minute. Oh, man. World's not crumbling in Berlin, are you sure? Everybody says it is. You've got all those immigrants, it must be crumbling. What the hell is Prevost Harbor? Middle of nowhere?
Show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Talk Radio.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook show on this beautiful, sunny, humid, hot, beautiful Puerto Rican day. Evening, I guess it's evening. It's not sunny anymore. It's dark outside. So thanks for joining us. And today we do what we do once a month, which is you know, people have proposed various topics I should cover on Patreon. And then if you're a patron on Patreon, you can vote on those topics, and you guys all voted, and I answer the questions that got the most votes. And I've listed the questions in Facebook. I've listed the questions that we're going to be answering. And we're going to go from the top down. And I've only skipped one question for which I don't have an answer. So I might just read it and tell you I don't have an answer. And we'll do it that way. And of course, if you have an additional question and you want to jump in, you can jump in on the super chat and put some dollars with your question, and I'd be happy to answer it. So, but first things first, we go with the Patreon, because they've given a lot of money and they've earned the right for me to answer their questions first. Somebody says on YouTube that I shouldn't wear thin striped shirts on camera, causes weird effects on video. But weird effects on video are kind of interesting, and it makes for more eye candy, right? All right, good point. I will. You're right. I would never wear this on television. One of the first things they teach you with television training is you never wear lots of patterns and stripes, and the thin lines here do create weird video effects. So good point. Won't do it again. I'll try to wear solid colors. The problem with my solid colors is they're all like gray and light blue, and I just blend into the background and you can't see anything. All right. Let's jump in. Let's jump in with the questions. Here is the first one. Let me get the longer versions of the questions. Here we go. This question was asked by Tim Kent, and it's a good question. What's the right way to think about laws banning specific products or uses, particularly those where individual actions are essentially immeasurable, but collectively everyone doing it causes or allegedly causes serious damage? He gives examples: lead in fuel, farm pesticides, fertilizers causing water supply issues, residential use of certain chemicals, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, it's a good question. It's one of these questions. In one hand, I could say, we'll solve that when we get there, but it always comes up, right? People are very concerned because we've been trained and educated that capitalism causes environmental disaster. We've been trained and educated that it is only the environmentalists and government protections that save us from all these environmental, degradations and these really harmful products. And the fact is that these are hard questions. So the answer isn't, we don't care, poison the air, poison the water, go ahead, it doesn't matter, the market will take care of it. No, there are clearly effects that the market cannot take care of because they can't price them. So, and these are good examples, products or things that we do that cause real impact on other people, but it's not any one person who's causing that real impact. So let's break this down to a few things. First, the impact, because you say causes or allegedly causes. Put aside allegedly causes. So the government can only intervene, and we'll get to how it intervenes. The government can only intervene when it is, as certain as one can be about these things, clear that a particular cause is creating a particular problem. That is, a particular particle in the air is causing people, cancer, or causing people to drop dead at the extreme, right? Or causing people real problems. Or it is pesticides and fertilizers, clearly, that are leaking into the water supply and causing the water to be polluted and cannot be used anymore. So they have to be clear causes to, and the causes need to be scientifically proven. It can't be speculation. It certainly can't be what environmentalists push for today, which is you have to prove that you're not causing any harm. I mean, that's impossible. You can't prove a negative in that sense. So the burden of proof has to be on those who claim there is harm being caused. They have to show the causal link between the particular activity and the harm being done. Now, if you can show that there is that relationship, right, then, for example, you sue oil companies for the fact that there's lead in fuel because you have scientific evidence that the lead in the fuel is causing problems, and supposedly there is such proof, and you sue them, and you probably get a lot of people together who are being affected by this, and you sue the oil companies, and if a court finds, based on objective scientific evidence, that this is indeed a problem, then they would A, fine the company, and B, they could ban the use of lead if there is significant damage. With one caveat, and it's an important caveat, and granted, people are going to say, but wait a minute, how do we make that assessment? And the caveat is you cannot ban an activity or a substance that, even though they might be doing harm, in banning it, you would basically stop human progress, civilization. You would basically prevent continued, or human life would actually decline because you banned this product. And I'll give you an example of this. The best example I can think of this is burning coal in the 19th century. So burning coal in the 19th century clearly polluted the air, and polluted the air in ways that really hurt the health and the health of people breathing in the air. That is, there was soot in the air, there was coal soot in the air. You were breathing it in. It clearly caused damage to the lungs. And my guess is you could objectively, if the science was up to it, I'm not sure the science was in the 19th century, but if it was, you could show that it is connected, right? You can then ban coal. You can't just say you can't burn coal anymore, and thus end the Industrial Revolution. And all those people getting sick from coal would now die of starvation oh, now I have to return to the farm for subsistence farming, and human life expectancy would drop to 39. Yeah, you prevent them from being sick, but human life expectancy dropped. So you can't argue that there's a violation of rights here when the essential activity is an activity that is promoting human life, that is generating human progress and promoting human life. So and I know I knew I'd get this. Isn't that a pragmatic argument? No, because it's rights-based. It's based on the damage done to you, but it's based on the damage done to you taken within the context of progress of your whole life, not just the specific damage that is done by the product. But the context of the product is actually, in this case, coal, is actually enhancing your life, is actually making your life better, is actually extending your life. And yes, there is a cost to that, and you have to bear that cost. Now, I think that when, for example, innovation happens and you get filtering technology and you get the ability to clean that air and burn that coal in a much cleaner fashion so that people are literally not getting sick because of the coal that you're burning. I think when that happens, and it's not an issue of ending civilization as we know it, then sure, then I think you can not ban the use of coal, but you can require that the number of particles in the air as a result of the coal burning be reduced, that you not, through your activity as a coal producer, cause so much harm to the people breathing the air that it causes real detriment to their life. So it's not that. So you have to prove that there's real damage. And the remedy cannot be worse in dramatic fashion than the problem you're trying to solve, right? Now, that's probably the hardest case I can think of. But think about farm pesticides, fertilizers cause water supply issues. So in a truly free market, the water supply is owned by somebody. You could probably trace where the fertilizer and pesticides are seeping into your water supply. So you own the water. It's being polluted by somebody's use of pesticides and fertilizers. You sue those people, and through a court proceedings where you prove that it is their pesticides, right, that are causing the damage, you get them to stop, or you pay them, you sell them the water, or you come to some agreement between the two, but basically you sue them and you figure out the remedy, the appropriate remedy, given that they're doing that, right? Given that they're polluting your water. So their stuff is seeping into you. And you would have to figure out who it is that is using the pesticides that is causing harm to you and sue them. And for most environmental issues, that is the right way to do it, right? The right way to do it is to objectively find the cause of the problem, objectively find the polluter, not that they're bad or evil or doing it on purpose, the presumption is they're not, but to figure out what they are doing that is causing you harm, and then use the court system to remedy the situation. You don't need, for the most part, government laws and government regulations. Now you do in some cases, like the lead in fuel, I think you do. And let's say there's a chemical that is being put into the air, like lead, or from a particular plant that is causing you to be sick. And it's not just you, everybody who breathes in this chemical. It is completely appropriate, once this has been proven in court, that there's a true causal relationship here, then it's completely appropriate for the government, the state government, the federal government, to ban the use of that product, given that there are alternatives to that product, and given that product is not rise to the level of importance of coal, for example, in the 19th century. Okay. But the solution to a lot of these questions, but not all of them, and that's what this question is being sophisticated. He's not just asking about pollution. He's asking about pollution where it's difficult to ascertain where the pollution is coming from, or where the pollution is coming from the use of many people. Now, Greg in Facebook is saying that there's a good discussion of this, Greg Salamiri, by Rand in Objectively Speaking. So look at Objectively Speaking, an excellent essay, not an excellent essay, an excellent book with all of Ayn Rand's interviews, edited by Robert Mayhew. And it's on pages 210 to 212. She discusses this issue, and thank God, Greg says on Facebook that what she's saying is basically consistent with what I just said, so that I'm not contradicting Ayn Rand. It's always good when I know I'm not contradicting Ayn Rand. But I haven't read that in a long time. I remember a reference she makes to you cannot have a law that protects you while destroying all of civilization. I remember something like that. I can't remember if it's Objectively Speaking or somewhere in Capitalism, Not Known Ideal. I remember saying that. So the government does have a role here in rights protecting. There is a rights protecting role to prevent us from gaining harm from the use of products by somebody else. Where, and let's assume they're completely innocent. This other person is completely innocent. They're not trying to cause me harm. It's not a criminal offense, but civil law is there to protect me from somebody else doing something innocently, or through, even if it's not through negligence, but just innocently. But if I can prove that their activity is actually causing me harm, then suddenly I have recourse against them. And that is true even if it's, in some sense, everybody who's driving an automobile. Then the question is, who do you sue? I would say in that case, you sue the oil company, right? Because they're making oil with lead versus making unleaded oil, which was a possibility, right? And then they have to figure out, are they willing to bear the lawsuit that's involved with the lead, or are they willing to bear the cost of creating unleaded oil? Those are the kind of balances you would have to go through. Anything I've missed? Anybody want to jump in here with something that I might have missed? Tim, I don't know if you're listening. Is there some example you can think of that I haven't covered? As I said, most pollution issues are solved by property rights, but some of these examples, it's not clear. You go beyond just it's my property, your property, because it's a group of people doing it. But let me give you one other example where I'd say that this action by many people is causing you maybe some harm, but I say tough. I'd say there's no question that cars emit something from their exhaust. And let's even postulate that the stuff that they emit from the exhaust pipe of their cars is not healthy, is to some extent harmful to each one of us. What should be done about it? And this is an example of, in LA, which is incredibly polluted because of cars, should the government be able to stop the cars from emitting pollution, either by requiring them to be cleaner, or by just banning cars, or banning new cars, or banning old cars, or whatever, banning old cars, not banning new cars? And my answer to that is no. You know, if you live in LA, then you know you're going to live with pollution. If you've lived in LA for the last 50 years, you've known you're going to live in a place with lots of cars. And one of the downsides of living in LA is there's pollution. If you don't want pollution, you can leave LA, which I recommend generally. You should leave LA. LA is a crummy, I hate LA. I don't like the city at all. And one of the reasons is there are too many cars in LA. And my concern is not so much the pollution, but the waste of time spent in traffic jams everywhere, all the time. Drives me nuts. So if you don't like the pollution in LA, move. Go somewhere else. And, cleaner, newer cars are going to be more efficient and therefore going to have less pollution. But I don't think it's the state's responsibility to, in Los Angeles, demand that cars all, be electric, or all cars be newer than 2013, because that's when they had better, cleaner cars. That is an intervention in individual property rights. Right? So that's an example, a little bit like the coal example, where you can't just ban cars and you can't just intervene, and the damage, the harm being caused is small. It's a little bit from each car, but it's still small in a cumulative sense. And you have recourse, which is to get up and leave. I can kind of understand. People who originally 100 years ago moved to LA, and it was orange groves, and there were no cars. But anybody who's moved to LA in the last 50 years knew what they were moving into. They were moving into a place that's polluted by car fumes. You don't like it, move to Montana. So again, it's very contextual how you deal with these things. And somebody said, in cases where a solution is found, it should be economically viable. Well, it depends, right? If the chemical is spewing out cyanide and people are literally dropping dead, right, because of this, then you don't say to the plants, well, we'll wait until you find a viable alternative to using cyanide. No, you stop the thing, you stop using the cyanide. That's it, because of the extent to which there's harm here. So again, it has to be very contextual. In the case of leaded and unleaded gasoline, there would have to be some kind of economically viable. And I wouldn't have banned leaded gasoline initially. I would have let it go through the courts, have a judgment against the oil companies, make it economically unviable for them to use leaded, and provide them with an incentive to switch to unleaded gasoline. I think I got that right. Oh my God, the anti-Semites all over my YouTube thing. What are we gonna do? All right. Could the same reasoning be applied to smoking in public? Well, I mean, you'd have to, from what I understand, there's almost no proof that secondhand smoke is damaging. It's an inconvenience to have people smoking in public and you having to be next to them. You can walk to the other side of the street. You don't have to walk next to them, particularly today where so few people smoke. No, I don't think smoking would be banned, even if there was a minor harm that you can find, although I doubt that minor harm even exists. You have options. You can go into the restaurant that's not smoking. You can cross the street, and things like that. So no, I don't believe in smoking bans for these reasons. All right, I remind people on YouTube, if you want to ask me a question, including about Jewish conspiracies, put your money where your mouth is, and put some dollars associated with it. Dan, I will get to your question in a minute. Let me do at least two more questions from the Patreon, because they have paid more money. I'm a capitalist. All right, this one is from Ron Housley. And all right, let me read the whole thing because it's a long description, but I think it's an important issue. Again, a historical issue more than it is a philosophical issue. The famous documentary, New Yorker documentary film by Rick Burns on PBS shows us the profound poverty in nearly half of New York City immigrant-fed masses during the period 1890 to 1911. The masses who lived in the vast networks of tenements. It was described as an era of unrestricted immigration combined with little regulation over business. The narrators of the documentary make the case that the problem is twofold. One, lack of regulation over business, lack of labor laws, lack of safety laws. And two, the gap in wealth between rich and poor is fueling the poverty itself. Now that's a bizarre claim, in part because of the economic safety net had not yet been imposed. It was an era prior to minimum wage laws, prior to occupational licensing laws, prior to labor laws, prior to most business regulation. it would be great to have a good historical explanation for the poverty and the misery of the other half of that era. Poverty and misery that directly led to all the laws and regulations that we now blame for today's poverty. Okay, it's a good question. It's an important historical question. And actually, here's a challenge to objectivist historians, if there are any out there, or historians of the free market, if they are out there listening. I don't know if there are any. But to me, there's a lot in history that is fascinating, and there's a lot of topics to be thought about and written about and researched in history. The era that I think gets short shrift, particularly by free market guys, I mean, all the objectivist historians I know specialize in the Founding Fathers. All right, we get it. We got the Founding Fathers. They're great. I mean, it's an important period. It's fantastic. But I think a lot of good work has already been done there. I think the two eras where some really, really, really interesting historical work needs to be done, primarily by objectivists, but by any free market thinker, at least to some extent, by objectivists primarily the Enlightenment, the era that led to the Founding Fathers, maybe from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment, that period in European history, leave American history, European history, is so important to human civilization, so important to our prosperity and achievement and success today, that it is almost criminal that there is so little, I think, good history. And the reason I say an objectivist needs to write that part of the history is you need to integrate the philosophical achievements of the time into the historical narrative of what's actually going on. That kind of history, not the history of philosophy, the history, what actually happened? What were the events that were going on? What were the importance of it? What's the causal relationship? And what is the relationship between the ideas and these development, and not just philosophical ideas, because I do not think you can understand history without, and Leonard Peikoff talks about this in DIM, you can't understand without understanding the scientific revolution, the attitude towards science, the aesthetic revolution, if you will, that happened during the Renaissance and continued during that period, and what the kind of atmosphere, the kind of sense that created in the world, in the intellectual world, in the sophisticated world, in the world of people, a minority, a tiny minority of the people who were thinking, who engaged in thought. So the role of aesthetics, the role of science, and the role of philosophy. And then what are the events of the day? So, I mean, I would love to see somebody grapple with this who's an objectivist. The Renaissance to through the end of the Enlightenment, through the end of the 1800, let's say. And then I would love to see, a history like that, but I'd say two types of history of the 19th century. One, and I think this is desperately needed, and this a free market economist, a good free market economist, his economic historian could do. A real history, economic history of the 19th century. What actually happened? What was the state of poverty in New York City between 1890 and 1911? I'll get to that in a minute. But what was it actually like? What was the state of poverty in the rest of the United States? How many of the people in New York stayed in New York, and how many people left and went to Cleveland and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and far out into the West or San Francisco and places like that? How many of them got involved in the gold rush? If you think about the United States in 1776 and life expectancy, wealth per capita, and everything else, it was incredibly poor. Incredibly poor. And if you look at 1911, when supposedly the peak of this massive poverty in New York City happened, life expectancy had almost doubled. Wealth, average wealth per capita was dramatically higher. So what does it mean to say people were poor in New York City? How is that relative to average people in 1776 What caused that rise in wealth? What do we see during that period? Was there, for example, a depression, as some economists claim, in the 1890s? Or was it just price deflation caused by massive increases in productivity? Lots of these interesting economic questions. To what extent were the problems economically in the 19th century caused by monetary, the federal government's various monetary regimes and the distortions they created in money? To what extent were they caused by the beginnings of regulation? To what extent was all the railroad stuff caused by railroad bankruptcies and railroad problems caused by government intervention in railroads, which really was right from the beginning of railroads? They started that intervention. So all of that, there's so much richness. I mean, think about Folsom, Burton Folsom, who I really, really encourage you all to read. Think about his book. If you've read it, you should read it if you haven't. The Myth of the Robber Barons. Now take that approach to history and do it for the entire 19th century. It would be great to have a book that gave the economic history of the 19th century. And then I think beyond that, it would be great to have a history of the 19th century. That is, to what extent was the 19th century influenced by the Enlightenment? To what extent was it influenced by the anti-Enlightenment Kant and Rousseau and the German idealists? To what extent was the whole way in which we perceive 1890 to 1910 a consequence of the mudracking that was going on and that was initiated by the progressives in New York during this period? And to what extent is there objective evidence of this extensive poverty? So again, to what extent did ideas influence what was going on in the 19th century? And then, of course, what happened with aesthetics and the science of the 19th century? How were all those integrated? Just like you did in leading up to, through the Enlightenment, you should do the same thing with the 19th century. And that would be amazing. And then an objectivist should do a history of the 20th century, because I don't think we have enough of that. So there's a lot of work for historians to be done. Interesting work, fun work. I wish I was 22. I mean, if I had to start over, I mean, it's hard to say this because I don't really regret anything that I've done. So it's not like I would say, I don't like what I did, so I'd like to do something else. But if I would start over, I'd love to be an historian, because history is so interesting. It's so fascinating. And all these intersections between different ideas. I mean, as an historian, you need to know philosophy, you need to know something about economics, you need to know something about the impact of art and aesthetics on a culture, you need to know what a culture is, and you need to know how cultures evolve. It's so interesting. And instead of, Greece is interesting, but I wouldn't study Greece. I would study Enlightenment through the 20th century. I mean, that to me is the most interesting. It's a period where I think we can learn the most about progress, about flourishing, about success, about kind of how we created the modern world and how we can take the modern world to the next level, and how we can show the objective proof of the efficacy of reason, the objective proof of the efficacy of romantic art, the objective proof of the efficacy of capitalism, the objective proof of the efficacy of freedom. So I know I'm off topic so far, but if there are historians out there, if they're young kids going to college right now, wow. I mean, that would be such a fun project to take on. That's what I would want to do if I was starting over. Too late. I'm too old. Can't do it. It's your turn. Go do it, please. And do it quickly, because I want to read those history books. I want to be involved. Ask for funding. Maybe the Institute will fund your work. I would if it was up to me. So, I think that's some of the most important work anybody could be doing today. Anybody could be doing today. Intellectual work. All right, now poverty in 1819, 1911 in New York City. So I don't know all the details. Again, I'm not an historian, and I haven't done the historical analysis of this period. But to me, it's fairly obvious that this is way, way, way overstated. Now, not to say that there wasn't real poverty in 1890, 1911. There was real poverty in London during the same period. It makes sense that there would be real poverty in these places during this period of time. Capitalism was just beginning. It was in its infancy still. It was only 100 years old, or a little less than 100 years old. And, it's still figuring itself out. The entrepreneurs were still figuring out what it works. There's a kind of a sequence to innovation. And you build, every generation builds on the capital that already exists, builds on top of the knowledge, on top of the productivity, on top of the technology that already exists. So every generation can be more productive, and therefore wages can grow and grow and grow. So it's still early in the history of capitalism, and jobs are still being created at a massive pace, but they're still being created. A lot of the jobs are very low value added, and there are a lot of people who can do the same job. So there's competition for the job that's driving down labor costs, but there's enough new job creation so that most of the people, almost all the people in 1890, 1911 were getting a job. There wasn't huge unemployment during this period. Even in New York. Now put aside the fact that what they don't show you are the statistics of all the people who left New York. For Pittsburgh, which was massively industrializing. For Cleveland and Cincinnati, where the Industrial Revolution was booming. To the West, where there was a gold rush. To the farms of Minnesota and Wisconsin and Kansas, where people were settling and creating a life for themselves. So all they show you are the people who didn't leave New York. But hundreds of thousands, and during this period, maybe millions of people left. Millions of people were coming in. The largest migration, probably in human history, maybe with the exception of the migration within China from rural areas into the city. And even there, as the migrants come into the cities, they are dirt poor because they are massive numbers competing for few jobs. But as more and more and more jobs are created because they're coming into the cities, and because entrepreneurs are building new businesses, their standard of living goes up. And more migrants come in and they start off very poor and their standard of living goes up. And 1890 to 1911 is one generation. And for one generation to be in real poverty during this period of time is nothing. Nothing. One generation, historically, from a historical perspective. Now, what did poverty mean in 1890 to 1911? Was it a poverty of subsistence farming in 1776? No. They were much better off, much better off. Now, today we look at them and they lived in mud and it was filthy and life expectancy was only like 50 something. And there was no health care, right? There was no health care. Medicine was really, really primitive. Yeah, they lived in the mud, but human beings have lived in the mud since the beginning of time. I mean, the only periods where we lived in cleanliness are like the last 100 years, post 1911, because we created so much wealth that we could live outside of filth. They are starting to have running water. They're starting to have, sewage during this period. Also, during this period, their children are not working anymore. They can afford now to not have their kids work. So they're making enough money so the kids don't work. Child mortality has dropped significantly, so their children are living longer. How do you measure that in terms of quality of life? I mean, it's the same argument about the poor in Southeast Asia or in Asia. Yeah, they're going to be poor until capitalism raises their quality of life, their standard of living. But they have to go through this phase where they are low productivity workers. They have to learn a skill. They have to become more productive to be able to earn more. None of this is related to lack of labor laws or safety laws. Minimum wages cause unemployment. Licensing laws cause unemployment and a reduction in entrepreneurial activity, which causes less jobs. Labor laws cause unemployment and cause, ultimately in the economy, less productivity and therefore lower wages. Business regulations cause, for the most part, lower productivity, fewer business creations, and fewer jobs. So without all the licensing and labor laws and business regulations and minimum wage laws did was everything else held constant. And it wasn't, because productivity of labor went up and wealth creation went up, but everything else held constant. They lower wages, they lower the standard of living, they lower the quality of life. So in 1890 to 1911, if you had imposed through some science fiction mechanism, because there wasn't the wealth, there wasn't the ability to have all these things. If you imposed all these regulations, all these labor laws, all these controls, all this redistribution, people would have been poorer. Now, the very poor might have been a little wealthier because they would have get redistributed. But then you would have had less investment, less innovation, less economic growth, so they would have stayed poor longer. Here, poverty was more severe, but it was shorter lived. So what a welfare state does, I mean, this is the wrong way to think about it, but I think it gives some insight into what's going on. What a welfare state does, it reduces the severity of poverty, and it extends its length, and it lowers the standard of living generally among the middle class and the wealthier classes. It lowers them. And the benefit, so-called benefit, is to make poverty less extreme. But the poor stay poor longer. Capitalism, the very poor might be poorer, but they're poorer for a shorter period of time, and the standard of living of everybody else is much, much higher. Right? So that's purely economics. So I would say that unrestricted immigration ultimately raised the standard of living, raised production, raised innovation, raised wages, because it raised productivity dramatically, because not only were you importing regular laborers, you were importing entrepreneurs, you were importing innovators, you were importing future so-called robber barons, great industrialists, you were importing great scientists and mathematicians and again, entrepreneurs and business people and so on. And you were importing laborers who could then work in the factories, because what you don't want is a shortage of labor where the entrepreneur can't hire people to produce the great innovation that he has. So the 1890 to 1911 is a complete misrepresentation. People lived much better than they had in previous generations. That's why they came to New York. Look, a lot of immigrants returned to Europe because they didn't like it. But the overwhelming majority stayed. Why? Because it was better than the alternative. And why was it better than alternative? Because they were free. Now, part of it, the reason it was better than alternative is because they didn't have Cossacks slaughtering them, butchering them, raping them. But part of it is that their standard of living was higher. You ask the Irish. The Irish, even though they were poor, were less poor than they were in Ireland. And same with the Southern Italians. The Italians didn't come here because there were pogroms in Italy, but because this quality of life, the standard of living, was higher, even though they were poor in New York in 1890 to 1911 than it was in Italy during that same period of time. And of course, it's that era of lack of regulation, lack of all this, that allowed us to escape. Now, again, I'm not saying there weren't abuses by capitalists. Capitalism was young. I'm sure people did stupid things. I'm sure people did immoral things. The law was still evolving to protect individual rights properly in this new era. Certainly some employers abused their employees, maybe chained them to machines, whipped them 3 times a day, I don't know. But if that was the case, the law was evolving to improve their law, to protect them from rights violations. But much of so you say here that it is this poverty that led to the regulations and the laws, and I don't agree with that. What led to the regulations and the laws was the mudracking. And mudracking was a particular form of journalism and intellectual activism initiated by the progressives who came to America with a clear leftist, motivated by German ideas about the role of the state as taking care of its citizens, as providing a safety net. They came to the United States from a Germany that had a welfare state, that had very, very much central planning, even back then, from Bismarck's Germany. And they came to the United States bringing those ideas of nationalism combined with the role of the state as being the father and mother, the parents of the citizen, and taking care of them. And they used the poverty, which was real, in order to condemn capitalism. And they, from the 1860s, 70s, you see the beginnings of this, but really it takes off in the 1880s, 1890s, and into the early part of the 20th century. They are in an intellectual campaign to destroy capitalism, to destroy business, to denounce business leaders, to show that Rockefeller and everybody else are horrible, evil human beings exploiting what is going on. And they are successful. And to a large extent, they are successful because there was no opposition. There was no, these historians that I would like to see, there was nobody there saying, no, times are great, guys. This is fantastic. Yes, this poverty, we're coming out of poverty. We're doing the right things. Freedom is the remedy for poverty. And if we continue on this path, we will be rich. And your children, you poor people, your children, if you continue to work hard, if you continue to save, and remember, these people saved, not like today. They consumed and everything. They saved. And they sent their kids to college because they could afford to, in spite of their poverty. If you look at the Jews in this period, who were dirt poor, who were part of these neighborhoods, the tenements where they couldn't afford anything. Within a generation, certainly within 2 generations, they're middle class, if not upper middle class. Where were the defenders of capitalism? The defenders of the system? And they didn't exist. And to some extent, they don't exist to this day, right? And that's why I think it's so important that we speak up, that we defend freedom, that we defend capitalism, because the left, the progressives in this case, the anti-capitalist left and right, look at the tariffs from the right, are winning the day. And they have the microphone, and they have the podium, and they have the lecture, the stage, they have the universities, they have everything, and all you hear, and they write, and they do the documentaries. They do the documentaries. So what you get is documentaries influenced by that anti-capitalist view. So anyway, so so my view is we need more historians to dig deep into these things. I think I provide an explanation, but provide a more detailed, articulate explanation for this in writing, in books, in articles, in documentaries. And to do that, I think we need, again, we need more activists. We need more of you out there. We need more intellectuals doing this kind of work. And it saddens me that there are not a lot doing it. There's just not a lot of people doing this kind of work. And I think that's sad. I think that's really sad. All right. I'm one more question, and then we're going to get to the super chat questions. I see I have 1, 2, 3 super chat questions. Okay, I'll get to them. Let's do this one. This is from James Troy. And he asks, in your shows, you sometimes criticize the beliefs or positions of other objectivists. What are the minimum necessary requirements for one to be regarded as a true objectivist? Now, first, let me say, when I criticize other objectivists, I'm not criticizing them, I don't think, to the extent that I'm saying they're not objectivist. I think there are a lot of issues like the election and like the evaluation of Donald Trump, where you can, up to a point, it is legitimate to have different views, which was the best candidate to vote for in the last election. I think there's some legitimacy to have different views about it. And there are other issues. There are lots of issues in aesthetics. There are lots of issues in politics. There are lots of issues, probably even in philosophy, in which objectivists, even objectivist intellectuals, can disagree legitimately. Certainly in the philosophy, can disagree legitimately about. So you ask, what are the minimum necessary requirements for one to be regarded as a true objectivist? Well, there isn't such thing as a true objectivist and a false objectivist. There's just an objectivist. But first I have to ask this question. And the question is this: why do you care? I don't really worry about is somebody an objectivist or isn't he objectivist. I mean, we engage in those debates and we discuss it, but it really is not that interesting. And it should be interesting to you. Like, I'm a leader of the objectivist movement, right? One of the leaders of the objectivist movement. I care about what is an objectivist, what isn't an objectivist, who I count and who I don't count as part of this movement, and so on. But why should you care? I mean, my view is you shouldn't. What you should be is a truth seeker. That's what I want to be. I want to be a truth seeker. I want to live by the truth. I want to have the best ideas possible to make my life the best that it could be. And objectivism, core philosophy is the truth for me. And then the way I apply it is that I'm going out and figuring out, using my mind, what is true in its application. And if I see people that are using their reason and have this as a philosophical foundation, then generally I consider them objectivists. But much more important to me is, are they good people, right? I know a lot of objectivists who I would not want to be in a foxhole with. I know a lot of objectivists who I would not want to be in a business with. I know a lot of objectivists who I wouldn't go out to dinner with because I don't like them. And they're not good people. Some of them don't have integrity. Some of them are just jerks and obnoxious. Right? And I don't want to be around them. So I want it, and I know some non-objectivists who are basically honest people who disagree with me about objectivism, but are honest, good, interesting, fun people to be around. And I'd rather hang out with them than many objectivists. So the real question is, why do you need to know who is a true objectivist and who isn't? I want to know who's a good person, who isn't. That's my criteria. And the criteria for that is morality. To what extent do they use reason to guide their life? To what extent are they honest? Do they have integrity? Are they living life? Not just preaching the philosophy, but living it. To what extent are they enjoying life? Are they embracing life? Are they making the most of the one shot they have on a planet to live? I want people like that, right? I don't, and if you don't call yourself an objectivist, or you do call yourself an objectivist, I don't have a test. Now, in my mind, an objectivist is somebody who adheres to the basic principles of objectivism, who gets the metaphysics, so who's, doesn't believe in the mystical, is this worldly, who is gets the importance of reason. Reason is man's basic means of survival, and takes that seriously and integrates that into his life. Who abides by the morality of objectivism. Those are the three areas which are crucial, right? And as a consequence, is a capitalist, is pro-capitalism. But that doesn't lead me to, if you voted for Hillary, you're not an objectivist. If you voted for Trump. Now, there could be an election where it's so stark that you could make that judgment. But I would say that holds to the basic ideas, the philosophical ideas of objectivism, and integrates them and lives them. Now, I don't usually know when I meet a person whether they live them or not. And to a large extent, I don't know when somebody is an objectivist, really an objectivist, a true objectivist, what you call it, right? If somebody says, I agree with the principles of objectivism, and I know nothing else about them, fine, they're an objectivist. If then it turns out they're a lying, stealing bastard, then I write them off as an objectivist and as a human being. If I learn afterwards that they are actually the important decisions in their life they make based on emotions, not based on reason, and I know some people who claim to be objectivists, and that's the case with them, then in my mind, I write them off as objectivists. They're not objectivists. They still might be nice people. They still might be productive people. They still might be, in some realms of their life, incredibly good people, and I could have a relationship with them. But, in important areas of their life, they use emotions rather than reason to guide themselves. What does it mean to be an objectivist if you're behaving that way? So those are the kind of ways I think about it. And then being an objectivist intellectual, now the standard is much higher, right? Now you have to really know the philosophy and agree with it, right? And it depends what kind of intellectual work you do. That will dictate how in depth I expect you to know it, and what kind of work you're doing. So, for example, I know a lot. I don't know David Kelly. For those of you who know who he is, yes, he says he agrees with these basic principles, but because he's an intellectual, because he views himself as a philosopher, then the fact that he disagrees with some important aspects of objectivism, he's not an objectivist in my mind. Certainly not an objectivist intellectual in my mind. He is an intellectual, but not an objectivist intellectual. Because as an intellectual, he should know better. He is contradicting objectivism in significant ways. If a layman said, I don't quite get the fact value issue, and, I'm busy, I don't have the time to really dig deep into it, then I'd say, yeah, fine. I'm not going to write you off as an objectivist because you don't get something that I think David Kelly must get because he's a philosopher. Then I say, it's an important issue. You should probably figure it out because it'll affect how you live your life, how you judge other people, how you judge values, how you live your life. Then it's important, do it. But I'm not going to write you off because you didn't get it. I am going to write off David Kelly because he's a philosopher. So I evaluate people differently. If you're some kid online who has a partial understanding of objectivism and are dabbling with it, and then fine, then that's, I have no problem with that. But if you then present yourself as a philosopher, a knowledgeable intellectual, then you better be good because you will be judged then as a philosopher. So who is an objectivist depends on the context. All right. There's a bunch of other questions I'm going to try to get to, but let me turn to the super chat questions. What's your opinion of Roy Kroc and his portrayal in The Founder? Watching the movie objectively, I saw him as doing most of the work, taking all the risk. Yeah, so I thought for most of the movie, Ray Kroc was presented as heroic and creative and taking on risk and having the vision and having the gumption to really see what was possible with McDonald's. This is the story of McDonald's. But you also have to recognize that he lied in the end of the movie. Now, again, I don't know if this reflects reality or not, so I'm not judging Roy Kroc himself for this because I don't know if it's legitimate to judge him because, I don't know how accurate the portrayal is. But, he committed an act of dishonesty. He basically promised them something on a handshake, which he then reneged on. And I think that's dishonest. Now, I think there are other ways to deal with it. Now, the fact is that sometimes you take all the risk and you do a lot of the work and you have the best ideas, but you are not going to make all the money. You could found a company and have, I don't know, let's say 25% of the stock and hire a CEO and he gets 10% of the stock. And it turns out that the CEO actually is the person who takes this company and makes it worth billions. He's better than you, but you started it. And you maintain 25% and you'll become richer than the CEO, even though he took the risk. And that's completely legitimate. That's completely right. There's nothing wrong with that. Right? You created the opportunity for the CEO to get what he did. And the reverse is right as well. It depends on the context. So, and it was all done without lying, without cheating, straight up, honestly, then whatever the outcome is, the outcome is. It's a just outcome. So the fact that he took the risk didn't legitimize him then, in a sense, lying to them in order to generate a greater portion of the return at the end of the movie. So I liked the movie. I found the character interesting and I thought generally positively related, not completely. But with this clear committing an immorality at the end, and that's sad. That's sad. that had to be a part of the real story if that's the case, and certainly and sad if they added it on to a movie just to make him more human or whatever, then that would be sad as well. So see, you got Brian Lawson on your wall. Any other artists you recommend? Also, what do you think of the Objective Perspective Journal? So I don't know the Objective Perspective Journal. I don't know what that is. I like Brian Lawson. You know, he's not my favorite author, painter, but I like his work. I find it more, some of it more on the illustration side than on what I would consider the fine art side. I mean, I like some of the artists that Ayn Rand liked. I love Capelletti. Capelletti's just magnificent. Some of his paintings are magnificent. Some of my favorite paintings, a couple of my favorite paintings are Capelletti paintings. I love 19th century art generally, primarily the French and English academics oh my God. The problem is that I'm going senile and I can't remember names, but Frederick Leighton and Alma Tadema and some of the pre-Raphaelites, but a lot of the academics, Bouguereau and Jerome. I love Jerome. Jerome has some magnificent paintings. And so a lot of that 19th century art. And then, of course, I have a huge admiration and can really enjoy, although I wouldn't hang in my home, in art on my walls. Earlier paintings, the paintings of Michelangelo. I do have somewhere in my house. I have the Birth of Adam from the Sistine Chapel. That's magnificent. Sistine Chapel, it just blows your mind. But Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael and Caravaggio and Titian and all those, and then of course, I love Vermeer. Like, I agree with Ayn Rand about Vermeer. Vermeer is magnificent. And then there was a whole Dutch school of painting during that same period, Van der Hoek or whatever, who did magnificent paintings that I really enjoy and I really love. So and then there's still lifes from that period that are beautiful and magnificent. So, but a lot of that art, I have to say, although for me, I would hang in my wall, even if I had certainly the originals, but even a poster. And I do have at least one for me on the walls in my home. But most of that art, particularly the more religious ones, even though I admire and enjoy and a huge respect and enjoy figuring out kind of what makes it good and why it's inspiring, I enjoy in a museum. I don't enjoy at home, particularly the religiously inspired ones, where I don't want to see Jesus on a cross in my house. Even the Salvador Dali Jesus, which I think is a magnificent painting, I wouldn't want in my house. I just, the whole idea of Jesus in my house just offends me. I find Jesus such a despicable symbol that I couldn't tolerate even a beautifully done Jesus in my house. Salvador Dali is an interesting case where I enjoy some of his paintings. Particularly when I was younger, I liked his paintings more. I like, they're interesting, they're fun, and it's beautifully painted. The style is magnificent. I would definitely recommend everybody read The Romantic Manifesto to get a sense of these. Thank you, Market Objectives. Thank you, Corinne Holeva, for contributing on Super Chat. Let's see, Corinne is asking a question. How do you think Israel should respond to Hamas setting thousands of acres of Israeli land on fire with incendiary kites? I mean, I've said this a long, long time ago. Israel should go into the Gaza Strip, should kill the entire political and military leadership of Hamas, should kill them all, and should basically destroy Hamas, make it, take away every weapon, every explosive, everything. And if that means occupying it, blowing up all the tunnels to Egypt, sealing it off for a while, and creating massive devastation there, then there are two options. Israel could either stay in Gaza and continue its occupation, which it had in the previous time, or leave, but with a clear, unequivocal message. You do this again, we will crush you again. We will completely destroy you again. But you can't bomb a few places and pretend, they are initiating warfare against you. And your responsibility is to protect your citizens. And you have to do whatever is necessary to destroy their capability of damaging, of hurting your citizens. And the only way to do that is a massive invasion of Gaza and the destruction of everything Hamas. And that means the killing of the entire leadership structure. Everybody. I've been saying that for years and years and years and years. Nobody listens. All right, here's a request, he says. I'll pay $100 for you to invite Gina Gorlin or another objectivist well-studied in the topic of addiction and related matters, plus $25 per question I ask. I mean, Sam, that's definitely going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. So you're just going to have to be patient because I've got a lineup of people I've invited on the show in the next few weeks, starting with a neuroscientist next week. I'm really excited, who works in psychology and who does neuroscience psychology. So lots of stuff to talk to him about. I mean, a lot of this evolutionary psychology, a lot of the stuff that Sam Harris talks about in terms of free will. I'm curious what he has to say. He's an objectivist, gone through the OEC, and a really good guy. And I'm curious what his thoughts are with regard to all the kind of neuroscientist research that is going today. Where are we? How young is the science? How real is it? How objective is it? How meaningful is it? And what does it say about, does it say anything about questions like free will, about questions like what are we born with, and how cognition kind of works at the biological level. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll be interesting. And I think you should be excited about that. So I'm having him on. I've got others, but Gina will be back. And I will have other psychologists on as well to talk about issues. So you will have your opportunity to pay $100 plus $25 per question. So don't forget, Sam. I'm gonna remember. I'm writing your name down so that when it happens, I'm gonna call. You didn't put a timeline on this. You didn't say next week. All right. Time Warp is asking me a question I don't really want to answer. What are your thoughts on Charles II? I don't really want to answer that. I haven't listened to enough of Charles to be able to give you a definitive answer about what Charles is. But let me just say this. Ayn Rand said once, she said it to Leonard Peikoff. She said she doesn't trust any philosopher under the age of 40. So she doesn't trust a philosopher until he's reached the age of 40. And I don't know how old Charles II is. He's probably 25. He presents himself as a philosopher. I don't know by what standard he presents himself as a philosopher. I just don't know. And I don't trust anybody at 25 who presents himself as a philosopher unless they are Ayn Rand. So that's my answer. That's my answer. The stuff I've seen where he's critical of me, or the stuff I've seen where he's critical of Ankar, he's wrong on, and silly in silly ways. I'm sure he's got some good stuff that where he says, is right. I think the stuff he did on the stuff critical of us vis-a-vis Jordan Peterson. If you watched my session with Ankar and Greg Salamiri, I think we addressed a lot of those issues. And what else? Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to, I mean, there's no reason. He's young. All the power to him. He's got a channel on YouTube. Let him build up his channel if he can get an audience. I think to the extent that he is obnoxious, rude, petty, which I think he's shown some inclinations of being, I think he does us harm because he turns people off of objectivism. But since he's not the only person out there doing work with regard to objectivism, qua intellectual, he doesn't do too much harm. So I don't have a problem. He will grow up. He will mature one way or the other. He'll either figure this out or he won't. But all I really want to say about it. So, all right, Ian. Sorry, I meant to say the objective standard. Another question I really don't want to answer. So let's just say I don't answer. you guys, if you enjoy it, that's great. Oh, Sam just did $100. Cool, Sam. That's great. All right, we'll definitely do it. You know, Gina has expressed interest in coming back on the show. You guys love Gina on the show. She was really, really good. She's very personable. She does good video, if you will. And I think having a female presence is always good. And you guys love, and I am interested in psychology, and she has this great way of integrating psychology with philosophy. And she's interesting. So I find it fascinating. You find it fascinating. You're on, Sam. She will definitely be on. Thank you. Thank you for that. So please don't send me a bunch of questions asking my opinion about other people within the objectivist movement. It's just that, you know, make your own judgment. It's your own, it's your own thing. The objective standard, there's stuff that's being published there, which I've liked. There's stuff that's being published there, which I don't like. It's mixed, like most stuff is mixed. But you should judge it for yourself. You should make your own judgment about what you like and what you don't like, and so on. But yeah, I mean, you should really judge, and you should judge. You should be discriminating, and you should judge, and you should make evaluations. But don't expect me to give you a list. Here are my favorite people in objectivism. Here are my second favorite. Here are people I really don't like. I give this one a 3 and this one an 8 and this one a 10. It's not objective in a sense that you don't have my standards. You can't have my standards. I can't give you the full context for my evaluation. Judge for yourself. And the objectivist movement is going to be filled with, if it's successful, with lots of people doing lots of work, some of it great, some of it good, some of it mediocre. If it's bad, then I'll say when it's bad. If there's a particular article that you send me and say, what's your opinion of this particular piece of work? Then I'll say it's bad, right? But I don't want to evaluate people and evaluate journals and unless they're really bad or they're really great and it's clear to evaluate. If you want great content right now, I think the stuff being created by the Institute in their journal, in the stuff I'm seeing is fantastic. I think read everything that Greg Salimeri writes, read the books that he's written, read everything Ankar writes. If you want really high quality philosophical thinking, deep philosophical thinking, I think the work of Greg, the work of Ankar, the edited works of Rob Mayhew, where you get Ayn Rand, of course, Leonard Peikoff. I mean, there's so much material of Leonard Peikoff. I mean, those, I don't have any qualifications to make. Others are more mixed, and it's more complicated to make an evaluation. And I'm not interested in spending time on this show giving you establishing the full context of my knowledge to make those specific evaluations. And even somebody like Charles too, I would actually have to go and listen to his stuff in significant portions of it. I've only listened to bits and pieces here and there, and it's not fair to him if I make any kind of extensive evaluation without doing that, other than I'll say, I think anybody who's 25 years and thinks they know objectivism, and to the point where they can consider themselves an objectivist philosopher who's teaching philosophy at 25 is delusional. But because, I still need, I've never been a philosopher. I'm not a philosopher now, but the extent of my knowledge at 25 was ridiculous as compared to what it is post. The extent of my knowledge before taking classes with Leonard Peikoff is ridiculous as compared to the extent of my knowledge after taking lessons from Leonard Peikoff. I've seen Ankar, I think, is one of the smartest people I know, go from when I met him in the mid-90s to where he is today in terms of his knowledge. I mean, the amount of growth is just unbelievable. So to compare a philosopher in his 40s with somebody in their 25, it's just not fair, and it's not a and one of the things about being 25 is when you're 25, you don't know you're 25. That is, you don't know how much of life, how much knowledge, how much stuff you're still going to gain over the next few years. Okay, this is a good question. What do you think of Israel's new national state law? Now, I haven't read it in detail, But this is a law that basically says Israel is a Jewish state. Judaism is part of. It's a law that kind of establishes Israel doesn't have a constitution, so it establishes it as a quasi-constitutional foundation of Judaism as part of the law. And I'm opposed to this law. I think it's horrible. What Israel needs is a secular constitution that separates religion, explicitly religion, from state. And that might recognize, because of the uniqueness of Israel, it might recognize the affiliation with Judaism as a ethnic category. I don't think it's even a racial category, because if you look at Yemenite Jews and European Jews and North African Jews, they're not the same race, whatever the hell race means. But it's some kind of ethnic group. Recognizes its or doesn't, but basically has an immigration policy built into its constitution for Jews to enter. But once they're in the country, there's no role for Judaism in the country itself. That is, the country is 100% secular. It is ruled by secular law. People who are not Jewish are treated equally before the law with those who are Jewish. That the only exception, because of its role as a protect against anti-Semitism, I've talked about this elsewhere, it is an escape valve for Jews to come to that country. Other than that, the fact that it's Jewish should not appear in any of its laws, and certainly not in anything resembling a constitution. Why do you ask this question? Trump administration has set $12 billion in farm aid to farmers due to increased prices of commodities. Explicitly, it says, due to the raise of tariffs. So what happens is tariffs have gone up. So the cost of the goods that they're selling to the Chinese and elsewhere has gone up. So demand has gone down. So farmers are suffering. Remember, farm states are big Trump supporting states. So in order to compensate these farmers, to make sure that they continue to vote for Trump in the next election and to vote Republican, Trump is proposing a $12 billion farm aid. And I wonder if they go through Congress and pass a bill, or they do this unilaterally as the executive branch. You'd think this would require a bill. It's an appropriation. But, you know, we don't abide by the Constitution anymore. Certainly Republicans don't believe in the Constitution anymore. Democrats don't believe in the Constitution anymore. Nobody does. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think this just shows the corruption of the Trump administration. So he does something stupid called tariffs. And then because the tariffs are raising the cost for Americans, he's now subsidizing that. Now, where does that money come from? It comes from all of our pockets. So he's taking money out of our pockets with the tariffs, and he's taking more out of our pockets to put them in the pockets of farmers. By every measure, this is stupid economics, immoral economics, and exactly the footprint of the descriptor of what I call Donald Trump, the central planner in chief. He is a statist. He believes in government control of the economy, government manipulation of the economy, and this is an example of that, and it's horrific. And if Obama had done anything like this, all of these people who today support Trump would be flipping out. A socialist. He's a socialist. But Trump is doing it, so they're willing to forgive it. It's just mind-boggling to me that is happening. Okay. Any good econ textbooks you would recommend? Oh my God. No, I mean, textbooks. No, I'm sure they are, but I don't know of a good economics textbook. I can look it up and try to see if I can figure out one for you. But in terms of good books in economics, Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, all of Mises's books in economics, particularly Human Action, if you can skip the first 70 or so pages, skip the praxeology stuff and go straight to the economics. But Economics in One Lesson is excellent. You know, Thomas Sowell's books in economics are fairly good. There are some, Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch. Look for Austrian economists. There are a lot of Austrian economists who have good books in economics. Depends how deep you want to go and at what level you want to study. But the one book everybody should read is Economics in One Lesson. And about my cluelessness about Trump, I mean, I said that these tariffs would lead to negative consequences. They already have. I think everybody who supports Trump, in spite of the tariffs, is clueless. All right, you stated you enjoyed movies with an epistemic conflict. Have you seen Crimson Tide? If so, your thoughts? Yeah, I like Crimson Tide for that reason. The problem with Crimson Tide is it presents the guy wanting to launch and follow orders is the guy who is is anti-Soviet, who thinks the Soviet Union are evil. And the guy who wants to take a step back and what is the evidence and what are the facts is a leftist or presented as a leftist. So that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they pick there to link the epistemology with the politics. But it's Hollywood, so it's not surprising. But I would recommend the movie because I do think it's a good epistemological movie. It is about, at an extreme situation like that, what is the kind of evidence what would require in order to do something as extreme as launching nuclear missiles? What kind of evidence do you need? What is enough? So yes, I think it is an epistemological movie. It's an intense drama. It's beautifully acted. It's one of the first roles of Denzel Washington, and I think it's Denzel Washington, yeah. And he's brilliant in it. He's one of my favorite actors of the last 30 years. And this is one of his first really amazing performances where he really does a fantastic job. So I'm a fan of the movie and a fan of Denzel Washington. I basically go and see anything Denzel Washington is in because I like his work so much. But in this case, it's a good movie because not all the movies he's in are good. I like the movie. He's just done a sequel to one movie. What's it called? Anybody out there know what movie is on the screen right now with the sequel with Denzel Washington in it? Anyway, I saw the first one and I liked it as an action movie. And so I'll probably go see the sequel. Yeah, people told me, just last word on Trump, people told me he'll never raise tariffs. It's all a negotiating tactic. He's not actually going to do it. But people are going to respond. And of course, they didn't respond as everybody expected him to. So then he raised tariffs. He lobs missiles into Syria. He hugs and kisses and licks, what's his name, Putin's boots. But everybody says, oh, good consequences are going to come from that. Yeah, really? I mean, and then what will happen next? You guys completely rationalize every single step that this guy does. How would I handle the theft of intellectual property from China? I've said it about 24 times, right? So Seth, I'm saying it now, please don't ask me this again because you have no excuse. But I've said this so many times. I don't know why you have to ask. Don't allow into the United States any product that has been shown to be produced because of intellectual property theft. You don't raise tariffs on intellectual property theft. You don't tax stolen goods. You ban stolen goods. And if that means every good from China, because you could prove every good from China uses theft of intellectual property rights, which I don't think is true, but let's assume it was true, then you don't allow any good from China into the United States. But you don't raise tariffs to deal with intellectual property. You don't tax yourself in order to deal with intellectual property. You see, yep. All right. So that is how we deal. But I don't want to end on Trump. Let's see. Oh, there was a good question here. It wasn't one of the top vote getters, but I like the question. And I can only answer it a little bit because it's too big of a question. Maybe I can do a whole show on this, but I thought that this would be I was planning to answer this question last because I thought it would be a good way to end the show. And I hate talking about Trump, particularly to people who think he can do no wrong, which I think is so non-objective. And tariffs are so stupid, so non-objectively stupid that I don't want to talk about tariffs anymore. Okay, this is the question. Cool question. But with a impossible answer. The objective culture of the future. Assuming objectivism permeates a hypothetical future society to the same extent that Kant and Christianity do in the West today. Discuss the ways in which a culture of objectivism might differ from any other culture in history. Who would be the celebrities? What would art be like? How would greatness be measured? What might people's attitudes be towards the future or towards the past? How would people view their relationship to society, their families, and nature? What would people expect of their business leaders and politicians? What might people expect of political discourse? How might fashion be impacted? Would tap dancing make a comeback? Now, that's a great question. That is a great question because it stretches the imagination. It's speculative. Okay, before I answer the question, I have to answer a super chat question because they put money where their mouth did, but I don't want to end on that because it's kind of got a negative twist. Denzel Washington film out right now, Equalizer 2. He promotes Ta-Nehisi Coates in it. Who cares? I don't go to see movies because of the politics. You got to learn to separate politics out. So if somebody promotes Atlas Shrugged in a movie, am I going to go see it? No. I go see movies that I'm going to enjoy because of the story, the characterization, the quality of the cinematography, the aesthetic pleasure I get out of it. And the politics, who cares? Victor Hugo, the greatest author in human history outside of Ayn Rand, whose books give me more pleasure than any author in human history other than Ayn Rand, was a socialist, an out-and-out socialist. But I love his books. They're my heroes. They're fantastic. If you haven't read Les Miserables or 1793, 93, it's called 93. I can't remember what 93, 93, or The Man Who Laughs. So any of Dostoevsky's books, not Dostoevsky, Hugo's books. You've got to separate out politics. Oh, Jesus, we got to get away from politics somehow, man. Listen to my talk about how to be rationally optimistic. You got to separate that. So he's got a book of Ta-Nehisi Coates on his bookshelf. I'm not going out to dinner with Denzel Washington. My evaluation of him as an actor and the quality of the movies he makes has nothing to do with his politics. Paul Robeson was a magnificent opera singer. Now he was a communist. Now because he was a communist in a time where the communists were slaughtering people, I have a difficulty listening to his music because I get associated with communism. But Ta-Nehisi Coates, there are much worse things than Ta-Nehisi Coates. Plus, it's not a movie that's propagandizing. Enjoy the movie. I've even enjoyed movies where the hero is turns out to be an anti-business environmentalist activist because she was principled. She uses, in the movie at least, she uses a scientific method. She fights for what she believes in. She's passionate. She's moral. She's ethical in every aspect, even though it's advocating a politics that I hate. But the characterization is so good, and the story is good. I can't remember the name of this movie. Anyway, all right. What would an objectivist culture look like? The bottom line is I don't know. One of the things I learned from Ayn Rand a long time ago, and that has really, I think, really become more real to me every year, is that you've got to question everything. The tradition is meaningless. This is my big disagreement with Hayek and things like that, where they say, if it survived a millennia, there must be some good in it. No, there doesn't have to be any good in it. Some things survive the millennia for stupid reasons. People can be unbelievably irrational and stupid in certain parts of their life. Religion, for example, has survived into the 21st century in spite of its stupidity or its wrongness or its damage to human life and human well-being. So the fact that it survived doesn't make it right. And it means we have to question much of the culture in which we live. I think the way men and women relate to one another is already being questioned over the last 50 years. And I think there's a lot of thinking that's going to go into that in the future as a lot of the, think about the changes in our relationship to women over the last 50 years, over the last 100 years, and almost all for the good. Now, think about that project into an objectivist world. I think it's when we understand more fully the role of femininity and masculinity in human life and what it really means and the role of sex. And I think that'll relate to our views. And I don't know what the answers to these questions are. I'm just raising them. What will our views of marriage be? And what will our views of monogamy be? Or whatever our views of sex will be? I think it's still a work in progress to fully understand the psychology of sex. I think it's still a work in progress to imagine, well, I don't think it's a work in progress, but to imagine what will the artwork of the future be like under an objectivist society. It will be much more similar to the 19th century than it is today. But what can you build off of the 19th century to make it even better, to integrate it more fully, to express, not just stylistically, but in theme, in everything, the kind of greatness that is possible to man in the world in which we live in. I don't think any visual artist has done that. I think Michelangelo comes close with his David. I think some sculptors came close in the 19th century, but close. I don't think it's full. I think the same thing with music. Think about the way Ayn Rand describes a Haley concerto in Atlas Shrugged. And you can think, yeah, that sounds like Rachmaninoff, but more consistent than Rachmaninoff. What would that sound like? What would the geniuses of an objectivist era produce and create? I don't know. They're geniuses. One of the things that geniuses do is they exceed your expectations. They exceed your imagination. What art forms would exist today in the electronic age that didn't exist in the past? I don't know. But my guess is there will be. There will be three-dimensional art forms. There will be hologramic art forms. There will be all kinds of art forms that don't exist today because technology will allow them to come into being, and they will allow them to become a medium by which people express their metaphysical value judgments, recreate reality, and express their metaphysical value judgments. That's a definition of art. What would culture be like? Well, I think it would be more cultural. I think we would value art, good art, real art, much more. Much more like, again, the 19th century, where middle-class people went to concerts and sat and listened to music for 3 hours, 4 hours. Wagner's operas can go on for 4 hours. And today, yeah, there are a few people who can handle it, and they do it once a year, and they train for it because it's hard, because we don't have that capacity. So I think it would be, I think the streets would be filled with sculptures. I think the buildings would be painted beautifully. I think there'd be magnificent, architecture everywhere. Architecture would be important. I mean, I did a show a few months ago about the boring architecture in America, how all the houses look the same, how boring they are, even expensive houses in like Colorado, where the land is not that expensive, we could afford to build a beautiful house, how they're all boring and dull and gray and look alike. Imagine a world in which people's personalities and characters and aesthetic values manifest themselves in agriculture, so that when you drove through a neighborhood, you would get, wow, look at that house. Ooh, look at that one. Oh, this is interesting. This is fascinating. Architects would be heroes, because they would be the people translating your values into a building, into a home. Wow. And the heroes of the past, we wouldn't be putting up statues for generals, any general, or well, maybe the few that actually fought for the good guys and actually won I mean, nobody would think about having a statue for Robert E. Lee. That would be in a museum somewhere. There wouldn't be statues outdoors, Robert E. Lee fighting for the wrong side and a statue for a general. Who cares about generals? But there would be statues for Rockefeller and Mellon and J.P. Morgan and Carnegie and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. I mean, there would be statues everywhere of Steve Jobs and Ayn Rand and Locke and Aristotle. There'd be this deep respect for ideas and philosophy and people who had great thoughts and genius. We would understand fundamentally that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And those giants would be our heroes. Those giants would be our heroes, and those giants are Newton. I mean, where are the sculptures of Newton? You find them in some places. You can find them in I think it's Cambridge. You can find them in the London Museum, in the one of the London museums, maybe in the London Museum. You can find them in places, but they should be outdoors instead of Admiral Nelson at the top of the thing at Trafalgar Square. Why isn't it Newton at the top of Trafalgar Square? So yeah, I can imagine sculpture for Washington and Sherman and Grant and Patton. That's about it in America. But all the other sculptures should be great scientists, great artists, great thinkers, great philosophers. Even Einstein, where are the sculptures for Einstein or Newton or Darwin? Darwin is one. You know, in an objectivist culture, not far from the Alabama Supreme Court, there would be a beautiful sculpture of Darwin. Religion would be a non-issue. Yeah, there'd be still some people who are religious, but nobody would care. And people would view it as a little weird, anachronistic. I mean, yeah, old timers, they're living in the past. Everybody would be, a significant majority would be interested in science and excited about new scientific discoveries. And there'd be such a good science education in high school that most of us would understand, at least to some extent, the latest scientific achievements. There would be this veneration of knowledge, of history, and a proper history. A veneration of business leaders, and admiration for business leaders. Politicians would be not that important. Yeah, people would still run for office, but elections, people wouldn't vote that often because they wouldn't care that much. Politics would be relegated to a relatively minor activity in human lives. We obsess today about politics. It's all we talk about. There'd be a very strong constitution. Once in a while, there'd be an interesting thing in Congress, and maybe the proceedings would be televised and people would actually be engaged because it was interesting. It would have to do with some technical issue regarding property rights, but people would be so interested in issues like that they would watch it. And maybe they'd get excited about a particular legislator because he had some interesting, important ideas about how to think about property rights with regard to this new issue that's come up on the internet or whatever. So, I mean, how might fashion be impacted? I don't know. We'd all be wearing shorts and sandals. I think ties would die. I think I would, in my objectivist future, ties are dead. I don't like ties. I know they make you look good, but I don't know if they make you look good because that's what we expect or because there's some objective. I mean, what they do is they create a nice symmetry. But there's got to be better ways to make symmetry than to strangle. So ties would go, I think. Maybe men would wear skirts. I don't know. It seems I here in Puerto Rico, like my wife wears these dresses and it's like, I should wear one of those. I mean, it seems so much cooler. There seems to be so much more ventilation. So, I don't know. To what extent are what men wear versus what women wear an issue of a true reflection of differences between masculinity and femininity, and to what extent are they just issues of tradition? What else could I say, right? Oh, somebody said the human body would be much more venerated. Yeah, I think beauty would be important. It wouldn't be, again, you wouldn't judge people based on their beauty, but beauty would be important. Taking care of your body would be important. Taking care of your life would be important. And therefore, taking care of your body, which is part of your life, would be important. I think in not the way that people do it today, where it's the be all end all, where it's the purpose for existence, where people watch everything that the Kardashians do because, I don't know, the Kardashians are rich and they're beautiful or whatever. No, they're horribly ugly because of who they are, because of the kind of soul they have. People are enjoying the idea of me dressed in a dress. I've never done that. I have no desire to do that, but I don't know if that's just because I bought into the conventionality or not. Yeah, there'd be no tattoos. I'm with Seth on the tattoos. I'm violently opposed to Seth on Trump, but I'm with him on tattoos. I don't think that tattoos and anything that mutilates the human body. I'm not big on jewelry in different parts of the human anatomy. I don't like them. Don't tell Amy. But I don't like nose rings or any stuff like that, What else? Yeah. So I think fashion would celebrate the human body. It would celebrate life. It would celebrate comfort. It would celebrate elegance and beauty. And it would have to be beautiful. And what are the standards of beauty in fashion? That would be interesting. And that would be something people would debate. And that would be much more important than politics. Right? And people would have a spring in their feet. A little bit like, I think, 19th century America, like maybe 10 years ago in China, but more so, because it wouldn't be just the escape from poverty or the escape from slavery or the escape from authoritarianism. It would be a true love of life, a deep, meaningful love of your own life, and profound understanding of the value of that. We would be psychologically healthier because we wouldn't have been raised on Jewish Christian crap. We wouldn't be raised on altruism. We wouldn't be raised with Jesus looking down at us, making us feel guilty. We wouldn't be raised with irrational parents, to the extent our parents were irrational to some extent or another. We wouldn't be raised with tradition-bound mentalities. So I think that everybody would be just happier. And I know I'm painting a utopia, but I really see it that way, because even if the majority doesn't get it fully, just like the majority today doesn't understand Kant or doesn't understand any philosophy, that doesn't really understand religion, it will be so inculcated into the culture, into the art, into the way people think about the world, into our educational system, into what you study in school, that this whole mentality and this whole approach, pro-life approach would dominate. I mean, I hope some of you, those of you who are young here, will live to see that day. I hope, or at least the beginnings of that day, because this is going to take 100 years, at least, I think. Some of you might live to be over 100, so you might see another 100 years, but most of us won't see it. Most of us, hopefully, I hope before my lifetime, to say the tide has turned. I can't say that yet, although I think things are moving in that direction, in the sense that the interest in these ideas is growing, but the forces arrayed against it are still massive. I'd like to see the day where I can say, yep, we're on the path to victory. I hope before I die. That'll be nice. I hope before some of you die, or the younger ones among you, you can actually live, at least have a glimpse of this world, a glimpse of this culture, where people are living. I mean, when I say living, capital L, living, embracing fully every aspect of life and all the values necessary for that life, knowledge and science and wealth and business and education and taking all of those things seriously. And of course, art, aesthetics. Yeah. Roy says he's going to live to be 600, so you'll see it. That's great. Good for you, Roy. I mean, in terms of the technology that would be available, it's hard to imagine because, wow, I mean, think about how far we've come in the last 200 years without objectivism, with a pretty good Enlightenment ideas, but without objectivism. Imagine once we have objectivism, once we have true laissez-faire capitalism, the extent to which human beings will be able to invent and create and build and truly, truly flourish. All right, that's a great way to end the show. If you like the show, support me on Patreon. I'm trying to get to 500 supporters by the end of the month. 500 with like 483, I think. So I need 17 people who are not supporters of mine on Patreon right now in the next few days. But if you're listening live, do it right now. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/Yaron Brook Show. And $2 a month. You can do $2 a month, $200 a month. I just got a new $500 a month supporter. So I want to get to 500 before the end of July. It's doable. It's only like 17 people. So that'd be great. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel and please share all the programs. And I just want to say, I put up a number of my courses now on YouTube. They used to be only my blogging place. Now they're not videos, they're only audio. So, but I know a lot of people who listen to YouTube without watching. So it's available. I've got my What Caused the Financial Crisis courses up. And now my History of the Middle East, which I think is really good for those of you interested in Islam, interested in the Middle East. As a short course, you won't find anything, I think, better than this. It's up now, available on YouTube. And then it's also going to be, we're also going to have the history of Islamic totalitarianism. So the history of the whole jihadi movement, that's going to go up starting tomorrow. So please listen to those. If you've listened already, then share them so that other people get an opportunity to listen to them. I think it's some of the best content about the conflict in the Middle East that exists anywhere. So history of the Middle East, history of the Islamist movement, good stuff. It's going up. Financial crisis, and other courses like on the corporation and my course on finance. All of that is going to go up in the next few weeks. Please share that. And again, all of that is made possible by the contributions you guys make on Patreon. So thank you for that. And I hope you're starting to see the dividends by me putting up all these courses. Also, a lot of my videos, more of my old lecture videos are going to go up on my channel. So the channel will have more and more of a complete set of everything that I have. So we're really working on creating a vibrant YouTube channel. So I hope you can help with that. Subscribe, share, and support on Patreon. All right. Thanks, everybody. Particularly, thank you to Sam for making that $100 contribution on the Super Chat and for asking the questions. And Sam, we will have Gina Golan on. It's a deal. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. And actually, I won't see you until Saturday. I'm flying all day tomorrow, and Thursday's a busy day, and Friday I'm in San Jose. And then Saturday, I'll be doing my Yaron and Amy show from California. So I'll see you all on Saturday from California for the Yaron and Amy show. Have a great week. See you then. Bye.